Hi Pinewood families, this is Mr. Nitz and this video is for Tuesday, May 5th. Well, yesterday I had my roughest day with technology yet. I couldn't get my Schoology conference together, and I posted a YouTube video and somehow I must have clicked a button or a setting got changed to private. So I thought the video was out there and it wouldn't load, and I couldn't figure out why nobody could see it. So hopefully I've got that fixed. If you're seeing this video, I did get it fixed, and as I was sharing with a parent earlier today, I think that I just kind of learned that everybody has these days with technology, and I've had success for the most part since the beginning, but these things are going to happen, and you just deal with them the best as you can. Sometimes a Zoom call or a Schoology conference or a YouTube video or even just getting to a website to do the work that you're supposed to be doing, it just is hard. You got to mess around with it and try to figure it out. And some days it just won't work and you give up and you come back later and try again. And so, sorry for those of you who I missed today. I made sure that everybody knew I was available on Remind. I didn't get a lot of texts today with questions and concerns. Did have a few about homework packet pickup as well as getting a copy of the book Tuck Everlasting. And so to clarify, today, Tuesday, and Wednesday, the building will be open from 6 to 5:30. Those last couple hours, sometimes there's nobody there, but the lobby will just stay unlocked so you can pick up your book. Often Mr. Keene is there till around that time anyways, or one of the custodians or somebody. So feel free to pick up your homework packet or your copy of Tuck Everlasting if you still need to, if you didn't get it on Monday. Also, that would be the time to turn in your paper packet. There's about 5 or 6 of you who are doing work almost exclusively on paper packets, and I'm anxious to get your work and see how things are going and use that to help me shape what we're going to do continuing to move forward. Well, let's get into today's work, and the first thing is in language arts. We're going to be continuing to analyze plot, which means thinking about how the story goes. We've used phrases like introducing characters, rising action, a climax, falling action, and resolution or the ending to a story. Today you're going to be reading a very short story called Tina's Talent. It's one of those one-page read-alouds from Raz Kids. And in response to it, they're going to ask you to brainstorm a little mystery story. It's got 5 text boxes for you to fill out the steps in the plot that you would create this mystery story. And it can be about anything you want, as long as it's a mystery genre. And then on the back, they're going to ask you to write it out. It does not need to be super long, but I'd love you to get creative and write a mystery story. In math today, you're going to continue working on multiplying mixed numbers. And the strategy that we're asking you to use this week is changing those mixed numbers into improper fractions. So once they're in fraction form, you are already an expert in multiplying those fractions, and you can multiply them just like we did when it was a normal or proper fraction, but just it's a little bit more of a pain in the butt. When we were doing things like what's 1/2 times 7/8, it was easy. You multiplied the 1 times the 7 and the 2 times the 8. Those are pretty easy fractions to multiply because the multiplication numbers weren't too big. But today, as you change a mixed number into an improper fraction, the numbers are going to get huge. And so you can do them that way, and then you're going to end up with crazy fractions that have numbers in the hundreds or in the tens. But I'm going to encourage you to try a strategy that we introduced last week called pre-simplify. For example, in one of the problems that I just did in practice now, I ended up with something like 350 over 48. Well, I don't know that problem, and it's not easy for me to divide those numbers back into a mixed number, even multiplying to get that number 348 or whatever it was. It was very difficult to do that. I had to do work in the cloud and write this problem over on the side. Many of the problems that will be in your assignment will have the ability to be pre-simplified. And remember, that means you're checking to see if those numbers can be simplified before you multiply. Now, there's one way to simplify, and that's simply when the numbers are like this. When you just have a fraction that looks like this. Well, obviously 18 over 9 is just worth 2. You could change it into 2 over 1. And 4/16 could go down to 1/4. But sometimes when you want to pre-simplify, it means you're doing things like this. So when I have improper fractions like this, I don't want to multiply 25 times 24. That's going to be some huge number that I don't know. I'm going to have to do some work in the cloud. And then later, if that's my numerator, I'm going to have to do a division problem with that. But when I look diagonally and I connect 5 and 25 and 6 and 24, quickly I realize that those numbers can be simplified diagonally. So I'm going to do 25 and 5 first. What number is 25 and 5 both divisible by? 5. So I'm going to change that 25 divided by 5 into a 5. And that 5 divided by 5 into 1. I've already made this much smaller. I got rid of that giant 25, and even that 5's turned into a 1. Multiplying times 1 is a no-brainer. Now I'm going to try 24 and 6. What's 24 divisible by that 6 is also divisible by? Well, there's actually a bunch of different numbers. You could use 2, but that's not going to finish my simplifying. I could use 3. Not 4, not 5, but 6. 24 is divisible by 6, and obviously 6 is divisible by 6. So I'm going to divide them by 6. 24 divided by 6 is 4, and 6 divided by 6 is 1. Now look at how simple that's become. The top is just 4 times 5, which is 20, and the denominator is both 1s. 1 times 1 is 1. 20 over 1, the answer to this question is 20. Now, if you didn't do it that way, if you didn't pre-simplify, let me show you what you would have had to do. You would have had to do 24 times 25, like this, in the cloud. And I'll do that now. That's 600. Ugh, I don't want to work with that number. And then in the bottom, 5 times 6 is 30. That's not too bad. But what that means is that my final answer would be 600 over 30. Now I'm going to have to do some big division problem. How many 30s fit into 60? Well, for me, this strategy is not the most efficient way of doing it. And I don't want to. I want to pre-simplify anytime I can. Now, if you want to do it that way, you can, but it's going to be a pain. My suggestion would be to try to pre-simplify as much as you can. The math assignment that we're going to give you today, I'd actually like to make a change to it even after it's been posted there. You only have to do the odd problems. So that means 1, 3, 5. You know how odd numbers go. Show your work, multiply it out, and then change it back into a mixed number. Pre-simplify when you can. Life will become so much easier. Social studies today, you're going to be filling out the crossword puzzle and the misspelled activity to work on the vocabulary words that were found in the Studies Weekly for issue 14. And then also you're going to be working on getting ready for your test on Friday. So anytime you want to listen to it or reread it an extra time, that would be great. Lastly, at the end of this video, in just a moment, I'm going to be clicking on the chapters 2 and 3 of Tuck Everlasting. So if you need to get your book out, now would be the time to do that. I'm about ready to load up chapter 2 and 3 on my computer. And we will begin in chapter 2. So I don't have the book copy yet, and so you're going to want to find that page number that chapter 2 begins on. If you remember, we were introduced to 3 characters in the story. There was May Tuck, the mom, and the 2 boys that she was going to meet. And there was Winifred Foster, aka Winnie, the girl that was unhappy about something and wanting to run away, possibly. Then there was this mysterious man who was looking for someone. Well, today I'm going to begin to read from the next chapters 2 and 3. Sorry, I'm going to adjust my phone a little bit there to get that glare off the screen. And so at dawn that day, that first day in August, May Tuck woke up and lay for a while beaming at the cobwebs on the ceiling. At last, she said aloud, "The boys will be home tomorrow." May's husband, on his back beside her, did not stir. He was still asleep, and the melancholy creases that folded his daytime face were smoothed and slack. He snored gently, and for a moment the corners of his mouth turned upwards in a smile. Tuck almost never smiled except in his sleep. May sat up in her bed and looked at him tolerantly. "The boys will be home tomorrow," she said again, a little more loudly. Tuck twitched and the smile vanished. He opened his eyes. "Why'd you have to wake me up?" He sighed. "I was having that dream again. The one where we're all in heaven and never heard a tree gap?" May sat there frowning. A great potato of a woman with a round, sensible face and calm blue eyes. "It's no use having that dream," she said. "Nothing's going to change." "You tell me that every day," said Tuck, turning away from her onto his side. "Anyways, I can't help what I dream." "Maybe not," said May. "But all the same, you should have got used to things by now." Tuck groaned. "I'm going back to sleep," he said. "Not me," said May. "I'm going to take the horse and go down to the wood to meet them." "Meet who?" "The boys, Tuck, our sons. I'm going to ride down to meet them." "Better not do that," said Tuck. "I know," said May, "but I just can't wait to see them. Anyways, it's 10 years since I went to Tree Gap. No one will remember me. I'll ride in at sunset just to the wood. I won't go into the village, but even if somebody did see me, they won't remember. They never did before now, did they?" "Suit yourself, then," said Tuck into his pillow. "I'm going back to sleep." May Tuck climbed out of bed and began to dress. 3 petticoats, a rusty brown skirt with one enormous pocket, an old cotton jacket, and a knitted shawl which she pinned across her bosom with a tarnished metal brooch. The sounds of her dressing were so familiar to Tuck that he could say, without opening his eyes, "You didn't need that shawl in the middle of the summer." May ignored his observation. Instead, she said, "Will you be all right? We won't get back till late tomorrow." Tuck rolled over and made a rueful face at her. "What in the world could possibly happen to me?" "That's so," said May. "I keep forgetting." "I don't," said Tuck. "Have a nice time." And in the moment he was asleep again. May sat on the edge of the bed and pulled in a pair of short leather boots so thin and soft with age it was a wonder they held together. Then she stood and took from the washstand beside the bed a little square-shaped object. A music box, painted with roses and lilies of the valley. It was the one pretty thing she owned, and she never went anywhere without it. Her fingers strayed to the winding key on its bottom, and glancing at the sleeping Tuck, she shook her head, gave her little box a pat, and dropped it into her pocket. Then, last of all, she pulled down over her ears a blue straw hat with a drooping, exhausted brim. But before she put on the hat, she brushed her gray-brown hair and wound it into a bun at the back of her neck. She did this quickly and skillfully without a single glance in the mirror. May Tuck didn't need a mirror, though she had one propped on the washstand. She knew very well what she had seen it. Her reflection had long since ceased to interest her. For May Tuck and her husband, and Miles and Jessie too, had all looked exactly the same for 87 years. That's the end of chapter 2. How can you look the same for 87 years? Maybe chapter 3 will give us some hints. At noon of that same day, in the first week of August, Winnie Foster sat on the bristly grass just inside the fence and said to the large toad who was squatting a few yards away across the road, "I will, though. You'll see. Maybe even first thing tomorrow while everyone's still asleep." It was hard to know whether the toad was listening or not. Certainly Winnie had just given it good reason to ignore her. She had come out to the fence very cross, very near the boiling point on a day that was itself near to boiling, and it had once noticed the toad. It was the only living thing in sight, except for a stationary cloud of hysterical gnats suspended in the heat above the road. When he had found some pebbles at the base of the fence, and for lack of any other way to show how she felt, had flung one at the toad. Missed altogether, as she fully intended it should, but she made a game of it anyway, tossing pebbles at such angles that they passed through the gnat cloud on their way to the toad. The gnats were too frantic to notice these intrusions, however, and since every pebble missed its final mark, the toad continued to squat and grimace without so much as a twitch. Possibly it felt resentful, or perhaps it was only asleep. Well, in either case, it gave her not a glance when she at last ran out of pebbles and sat down to tell it her troubles. "Look here, Toad," she said, thrusting her arms through the bars of the fence and plucking at the weeds on the other side. "I don't think I can stand it much longer." At this moment, a window at the front of the cottage was flung open, and a thin voice, her grandmother's, piped, "Winifred!" Don't sit on that dirty grass. You'll stain your boots and stockings. And another, firmer voice, her mother's, added, Come in now, Winnie, right away. You'll get heat stroke out there on a day like this, and your lunch is ready. See, said Winnie to the toad, that's just what I mean. It's like that every minute. If I had a sister or a brother, there'd be someone else for them to watch. But as it is, there's only me. I'm tired of being looked at all the time. I want to be by myself for a change. She leaned her forehead against the bars and after a short silence went in a thoughtful tone. I'm not exactly sure what I do, you know, but something interesting. Something that's all mine. Something that would make some kind of difference in the world. It'd be nice to have a new name to start with, one that's not all worn out from being called so much. And I might even decide to get a pet. Maybe a big old toad like you that I could keep in a nice cage with lots of grass and... At this, the toad stirred and blinked. It gave a heave of muscles and plopped its heavy mud ball of a body a few inches further away from her. I suppose you're right, said Winnie. Then you'd just be the way I am now. Why, you should have to be cooped up in a cage, too. It'd be better if I could be like you, out in the open and making up my own mind. Do you know they hardly ever let me out of this whole yard by myself? I'll never be able to do anything important if I stay here like this. I expect I'd better run away. She paused and peered anxiously at the toad to see how it would receive the staggering idea, but it showed no signs of interest. You think I wouldn't dare, don't you? She said accusingly. I will, though. You'll see. Maybe even first thing in the morning while everyone's still asleep. Winnie! Came the firm voice from the window. All right, I'm coming, she cried, exasperated, and then added quickly, I mean, I'll be right there, Mama. She stood up, brushing at her legs where bits of itchy grass clung to her stockings. The toad, as if it saw that their interview was over, stirred again, bunched up, and bounced itself clumsily off toward the wood. When he watched it go, Hop away, Toad, she called after it. You'll see. Just wait till the morning. The previous day's reading talked about 3 different characters. Winnie Foster, who had been talking about running away, and now we know why she might want to run away. May Tuck, going to visit her 2 sons, that somehow mysteriously the whole Tuck family looks exactly as they did 87 years ago. We haven't heard much yet from the other mysterious man, but I think we soon will. Have a great day, Pinewood, and go on to Schoology. Don't forget also, I'll be there at noon on Schoology for a conference for help with math or language arts or social studies or anything that you need. We'll probably have a Zoom on Wednesday at 7, so you can be ready for that as well. I'll send out the code on Wednesday so that you can log in with the password. Have a great day.